Let's get on to the Australian Open now. I mentioned at the beginning of the program that the Australian Open is celebrating everything but Australia Day. They've got First Nations Day, that's fine. Yvonne Goolagong-Cawley was there, that was great. They have Pride Day, they've got All Abilities Day, all that stuff's fine. But they're going to ignore completely our National Day, which I just find disgraceful. Amanda, surely the Australian Open on the 26th of January, which is in the middle of the tournament, getting into the semi-finals, could find 5 minutes to say, we love being here in Australia, surely.
Look, this is very, very disappointing. And look, I'm an Australian Day ambassador for Georges River Council, and I am really saddened by it because when you think about it, Australia means bringing people together. You know, we have such a mix of cultures in this country, and really, if you go overseas and you mention Australia, they think, oh, you guys are so cool and you get along with everyone. And just to wipe it completely, and for the Australian Open, I mean, really, if they want to get rid of it, get rid of the word Australia in the match or on the tournament altogether. But really, this is an opportunity to bring people together, and I think that's what they're missing. So instead of seeing it as, look, we're upsetting a certain group of society, and fair enough, everyone has a right to be upset about certain things, but overall, big picture is how can we bring people together and how can we celebrate all the wonderful things that our country has to offer?
Joe, News Limited Papers broke this story today, and when you dig into it, it gets even worse. So each year at the Australian Open, you have an Australian legend, which is going into a Hall of Fame. But what they do down in Melbourne, they have bronze busts of former famous tennis players. This year it's going to be Leighton Hewitt, who you couldn't get a more Australian than Leighton Hewitt.
He's as Aussie as Vegemite.
The thing and throwing his hat around. Exactly right. So what have they done? They've changed the date of that event from Australia Day, when it used to be, to the 24th, 2 days earlier. I mean, this is just crazy wokeness gone absolutely mad.
Yeah, and more importantly, I think it's just, as you mentioned earlier, it's just that absurdity of it. The idea, firstly, that these sorts of ridiculous virtue signalling gestures are going to make any difference, are going to have any material benefit to the lives of disadvantaged Indigenous communities is absolutely ridiculous. In fact, it puts people off even considering or wanting to address these issues, because they think that in addressing Indigenous issues and helping Indigenous people, that means that everyone else has to lose something, that this is some kind of zero-sum game. And it's this sort of stuff. I was a big Yes supporter and campaigner, and I can tell you absolutely, card-carrying fact, London to a brick, this sort of stuff is what cost the Yes vote its victory. This sort of stuff is why it went from 60% pro-yes to 60% no. And it's just so counterproductive, self-destructive, idiotic. I mean, you could use any name under the book. It's the same as things like, you know, the Triple J Hottest 100 moving from the 26th of January to the 25th. I mean, great, that's fine. And let me just check the Closing the Gap report. Did that do anything? No, nothing. It's madness. And the idea that you would, you know, just pretend that the day doesn't exist. And we know that 2/3 of Australians want Australia Day on the 26th of January. If anything, like the Australian Open, it's a great sort of bookend to the summer holidays. It's a great sort of last hurrah. No one's going around celebrating genocide. In fact, the official protocols of Australia Day, as Amanda would know, is not just to celebrate, but also to reflect. So we reflect on our past. We think about how we can better embrace Indigenous people and make sure that they aren't excluded from society. And it's a great day for migrants as well. I mean, the strongest support for Australia Day comes from people from overseas, people who have come here from overseas, who are desperate to become citizens and share in our bounty. It's madness, this stuff.
Amanda, the two males on this desk are going to tiptoe very carefully around this next issue and leave it entirely up to you. I speak, of course, of tennis legend Martina Navratilova. Now, she's had a go at Naomi Osaka after she lost her first-round match at the Australian Open. Have a listen to Martina.
She couldn't get to the ball that she wants to hit because she's not in shape. I'm surprised that she really started playing, that she got on the tour, that she played this tournament without clearly being in the top shape that she needs to be.
Now, Amanda, we know that Naomi had a baby, I think 6 months ago. If a bloke had said this, there'd be calls for his head. Over to you while Joe and I just sit and listen.
Look, the fact that she's playing after having a baby 6 months ago is phenomenal, and I think that should be celebrated to begin with. Now, the issue I find wasn't that she was talking about fitness, because a lot of people talk about fitness of male and female. It was that she actually compared her to another lady who had a baby 6 months prior, saying, well, she was able to do it and you're not. So the second you start comparing people, then we get into really murky waters, because really she was saying fitness is fitness, male, female, that way it's fair, but then to point that out is quite insulting. And really, I would much prefer pointing out the positives of someone, because I'm sure she's well aware of her level of fitness, and I think we should be celebrating the fact that a mother who's given birth 6 months prior is competing at such a huge tournament.
Joe, Victorians are still upset about the fact that Dan Andrews decided it was too expensive to hold the Commonwealth Games. He wrote out a cheque and ran away in the other direction as fast as he could go. I get a sense of a little backward step from the new Queensland Premier, Stephen Miles. He's talking about the 2032 Olympic Games. Apparently John Coates says the Games are in jeopardy if transport's not upgraded. Look, Miles is even casting a shadow on the reworking of the Gabba, which is going to cost about $2.7 billion. You get a sense that the Queensland government might be getting a bit nervous?
Yeah, there's something about Queensland and Victoria, these left Labor states, and I say that in contrast to the great, mighty, one true, holy Roman Apostolic Church of the New South Wales Right, which is running the show in Sydney. But I just find it staggering that I think, is it something of a kind of left-wing cultural cringe against sport, where you think we don't actually need this? It's only sort of, food and, bread and circuses for the masses, and really, this isn't the sort of stuff we want. We'll announce it to win an election, but then after that, we'll quietly just, cut the umbilical cord. I don't know, but it is passing strange. I mean, Stephen Miles has now ordered a review into a $2.7 billion knockdown rebuild of the Gabba that he himself approved as minister assisting the Premier on the Olympics. So he signed off on this thing, and then as soon as he becomes Premier, he's asked for an independent review of the thing he signed. I just don't understand this is yes minister. This is almost Monty Python. I just don't understand it. And again, I think it is the sort of thing where I think, maybe the left of the Labor Party, as opposed to the true centre and the right, but, as with the left generally, seem to just think that sport is a mindless indulgence of the great unwashed, and they ignore the huge amount of excitement and pride that it brings people.
Amanda, a small business in Queensland would be looking at this with great interest. I mean, a lot of people are probably already getting set to develop businesses leading up to 2032.
That's right, and they actually go through an entire tender procurement process to put their name forward, and it's quite an investment for a small business to do so. And what's interesting is that this particular development he didn't want to happen was $2.7 billion. And I can understand if someone is cautious because of a blowout or potential blowout of the Olympics, like with the Commonwealth Games and the claim that that was the case. The Tokyo Olympics was $13 billion, and that was 20% above what they actually expected it to cost. So if it's a genuine concern, that's great, because that's what we want. We want our politicians to actually look at the business case and so forth, but make it transparent. Show everyone what's going on. Show them what you signed off on exactly and why that's changed, and be honest and truthful about it, because it does have a ripple effect to the small business owners. A lot of businesses rely heavily on probably 2 to 3 years worth of work from this particular activity. And if they stop it, or if they pull out on something last minute, that could ruin livelihoods.
Joe Hildebrand and Amanda Rose, always nice to catch up with you. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.